Let's tone up, developing tone in choral ensembles. Should we be working on tone development as choral conductors or simply working on the choral repertoire? Here's one perspective. Maestro, tell me, how do I get a better choir? Answer: get better singers. So we have the conductor wondering, why isn't my choir doing what I want them to do? And we have the choir wondering, what on earth does he or she want us to do? There are three prevailing perspectives, according to Howard Swan, when it comes to ways in which choral directors work on voice building in their ensembles. The first is refusing to employ any means of voice building. The second is only using techniques they learned from their favorite teacher. And the third is, with no orderly plan, necessarily utilizing a great deal of vocalises, devices, and methods secured from many sources, with a desperate hope that the tone of the chorus will somehow show a marked improvement. Historically, voice building began with the chorische Stimmbildung out of Germany. The choral conductor, Dr. Wilhelm Ehmann, collaborated with the vocal coach, Frauke Haasemann. He was her youngest but most gifted student. She was his youngest but most gifted student. And so the collaboration began. If Ehmann was seeking the sound ideals of a 16th century papal choir while working on Renaissance music, Haasemann's instructions to the singer would be, to make the sound of a young choir boy, round your lips to the form of the shape of a pig's snout. What are the vocal challenges in young voices? Well, in women's voices, it tends to be breathiness, a chesty sound, thin sound, a throaty sound, and an ununified range. In men's voices, it tends to be a hooty sound, particularly in the basses, a nasal sound, particularly in the young tenors, a throaty sound, and once again an ununified range, or not being able to access the falsetto, or being unable to find a blend or connection working from the falsetto into the changed voice, or vice versa. So some questions we have to ask ourselves as choral directors. How do I know what great choral tone is? How do I teach that great choral tone? And how do I inspire them to want to learn it? And an added question would possibly be, does choral tone change from piece to piece, or from era to era, genre to genre, style to style? What is great choral tone? Well, tone quality really is all about the breath. Connection between the breath and the free emission of sound. And it's that connection that we work on primarily in our vocalises, in our choral warm-ups. Working on the breath and then getting rid of encumbrances that get in the way of the free emission of the sound. Good tone has three elements. All three of these must be present in a good choral tone: energy, beauty, and placement. Looking at the three of these, I have a philosophy that good tone has all of these elements, and various types of literature, depending on the specific piece, might have a different balance of the three of these, but they are all present. For example, we know what an energy piece might be. But if we have the energy without the beauty and the placement being there, we do not have a good tone. Same with beauty. If we've got a beautiful tone with no energy or with no placement, it just doesn't go anywhere. And again, we've all heard the singers that have all placement but no beauty behind that placement or no energy behind that placement. So it's a balance of the three, and the fulcrum can move based on the particular style of music that we're working on. Here are some energy adjectives. And these are words we can use in our rehearsal. Alive, animated, buoyant, energetic, exciting, lifting, spirited, vibrant, vital. Some beauty adjectives. And all of these are words that we really use to describe a beautiful tone. But these are the ones in the beauty category. Clear, floating, free. That's probably the one I use the most. Free, lovely, lyric, natural, pure, relaxed. And our placement or resonance adjectives. Brilliant, focused, forward, full, rich, ringing, resonant, round, and warm. So again, energy, beauty, and placement. You must have all three, it takes all three, but that is all it takes. That pretty much covers everything that would identify beautiful tone quality. Also important, everyone should sound exactly their age in their naturalness as far as the development of their sound goes. We get into trouble when people try to sound something that they're not. As teachers, we have three hats that we wear. We're the technician, the vocalist, and our singers are all of these as well. We're the musician who knows the notes, who follows what's written in the score, and we also have that added communication aspect. So we're the actor or the actress who is putting across the music that we're performing. So it's important that we tap into all three of these as we're working with our singers. As a technician, though, it must not be only about vocal technique without the notes and musicianship skills being there or the communication skills being there. As a musician, yes, it's important that we have all the correct notes, all the correct score marking, etc. But if our vocal technique is not behind it, or we are not communicating, we will not get the best choral tone. So we need all three of these to get the best choral tone. And I might add, it's impossible to get choral tone if we don't know the notes in the music. We tend to function in one hemisphere of thought when it comes to musicianship, and it tends to get in the way of our being a good vocal technician and or being a good communicator. So when do we build tone? We build tone during the warm-up period at the beginning of the rehearsal. It sets the tone for the entire rehearsal. Remembering that you may be the only voice training that many of these singers will receive. So it is imperative that we have a firm understanding of vocal technique ourselves, since this may be the only experience they will have with vocal technique. As we are working our way through the rehearsal, it's important to refer back to the training period that we have just established during our warm-up time. Keep referring back to that. As far as tone goes, gentle reminders all the way through the rehearsal. Encourage them to be listening for tone-building aspects of the rehearsal when they are rehearsing the repertoire. In other words, it doesn't stop after the tone-building period, but it works all the way through the rehearsal as we're rehearsing the repertoire. It's important that we get them and ourselves comfortable with talking about our choral tone throughout the rehearsal. And of course, probably the most important aspect of good tone quality for our choirs is that it needs to be modeled. So it needs to be the only acceptable sound in the room, including our tone as conductors. Kind of like a picture is worth 1,000 words type thing. If our tone is modeled well, we don't have to talk about it as much. It just becomes the standard. And be consistent about expecting it all the way through rehearsal. and that includes expecting good tone quality during sight reading, during singing solfege, that all of those solfege syllables reflect that good tone. It's important to also remember that singing involves the whole person, so the mind, the body, and the breath all need to be engaged. It's important also to remember that there are two different streams of approaching choral tone. One would be through imagery, and one would be through specific pedagogy. So, in my opinion, it's important to be using both of those consistently all the way through. So it's not an either or, but you can see here in this diagram we're crossing the bridge, and the imagery is based in pedagogy, and the pedagogy connects with the singer by using imagery. The imagery approach, again, must be based on sound pedagogy, enhances good technique, and the choir director must know if their students have the technique in order for the imagery to be effective. I've found that it works a little bit better for untrained singers to talk a little bit more in terms of imagery. If the mind understands a concept, the body tends to coordinate, versus the more experienced singers who are well versed in the pedagogy. The pedagogical approach is used in the training and sets the technique. When imagery is not sufficient, the pedagogy approach is the route to go. So why use imagery? Creative visualization is a powerful force, and it motivates a powerful response because it is coming from the subconscious mind. This quote by Roger Rocco from Vandercook College kind of says it all when it comes to imagery, and this is an instrumentalist. Playing an instrument or doing anything else requires complex physical mechanics. However, we must use a simplistic approach to create accomplishment. And we've all heard the quote, paralysis by analysis. So too much technique or too much focus on the pedagogy sometimes actually for our singers makes them more tense and does not allow for a free tone. So we need to go the direction of not specifically thinking mechanics, but thinking sound. What is the sound we are going after? And it is best to be somewhat unconscious of our physical maneuvers as singers, but very conscious of our musical goals. So if we focus on the musical goals, once again, the physical maneuvers will be freed up rather than tensing up and giving us the opposite of what our goal is. The Suzuki method focuses on the imagery much more than the pedagogy. Suzuki's quote here, "We can learn to play an instrument the same way we learn to speak language." So it needs to be a little more natural and intuitive. According to Don Nguyen, the way for us to develop our own concept of tone is to listen, and to listen to those we think are appropriate role models and get those people in front of our singers. He suggests that we base our tone on how the best singers look and sound when they sing. And the visual there is really important. Sometimes singers forget to look. Have them look in a mirror, have them all pull their cell phones out and video themselves, or have the camera on so they can see if they're actually matching mouth shapes, lip shapes, and facial energy. The vocal challenges we talked about earlier: breathiness, chestiness, thin, throaty, ununified range. What are some ways to address those? I found that the technique, one of the two Italian techniques that I found most effective, first one is the Appoggio Technique. That is the raised sternum and expanded ribs with the shoulders remaining low, sort of what we teach our singers generally. But I think the problem lies in the fact that that Appoggio position is not maintained when the breath is dispelled. So if we have a rapid collapse of air or a collapse of lungs, as we do in speech, It's not going to work to get us through the singing phrase. So the sense of